Welcome to Chandwell. My name's Michael, and I'm building this N-scale model of a rundown West Yorkshire town set in 1993. I'm making this terrace of 4 shops at the top of Station Road, and I've added some of the stonework detail to the front elevation. In this episode, I'll show you how I decided exactly what to model and how I made these tiny elements from card. The terrace is based on Brook Street in Ilkley. This beautiful building dates to 1855, and I'm really keen to capture some of its Italianate elegance in Chandwell. Above the shop fronts, I think the features that most stand out are the elegant tripartite windows with volute corbels supporting these lovely pediments. I think all that's right anyway. There's a lot of detail in the real building in Ilkley, and deciding what to leave in as well as what to leave out can be a challenge whatever scale you work in when you're making a model. Because I work in N scale, which is 1 to 148, some of these pieces are going to be really small. So what I want to do is I want to leave out all the tiny bits and get something that just feels right, without having anything that's just too small to work with. Let's take a look at what is possible. I can use 0.5mm card to make the triangular pediment, which works out at 19mm wide by 1.6mm tall. A couple of rectangles of card, laid edge on, can represent the base of the pediment. These are 2.5 and 1.9mm. I have no chance to make the corbels as intricate as the real thing, but I managed to make a rough shape just 1.2mm wide by 4.3mm tall. When cut out of 1mm thick card and stuck edge on, I should manage to get something that reminds us of the original. Which bits do we leave out then? I don't think you'd notice if I left out the protruding edge detail around the upstairs windows, or the sills which protrude farther than the string course, or these tiny little corbels under the windows. The chamfered edges of the stonework can be dropped, and the dimensions of the whole thing can be slightly overscaled to avoid having to do simply impossible sizes. So with all the bits designed and drawn in Inkscape, it's time to start making these little tiny bits of detail. I start off with some 0.5mm greyboard and stick the outline of the main elements onto it. These are just printed onto self-adhesive sticky label, which smooths into place on the card. It's now just a case of cutting it all out. But with elements just 1mm wide, the order that it's done in is really important. I cut the horizontal inner lines first. I take care to get the tip of the blade right into the starting corner and slowly and lightly guide my knife to the next corner. I stop a little short to avoid cutting into the 1mm piece that I want to keep. With a very sharp knife, it takes 3 light strokes to get through the card. I spin the card around and do the other horizontal edge. I do this so that my ruler is always on top of the piece that I want to keep. This means that the piece remains still and does not bend or fold or crease, should I catch something. I rotate 90 degrees and go again keeping my ruler on the piece I want to keep. Spin 180 degrees and repeat. Now it's important not to force the piece out. Remember, I didn't go all the way into the corner at the end of each cut. Pushing the piece out will bend the card, or leave one of those little fluffy bits that are always hard to get rid of. I use my knife freehand to release the final bits of card, and eventually the little rectangles pop out. I use full-length cuts for the triangle at the top, and then carefully cut around the window. I keep the ruler on the piece I want to keep, even if it makes the cut a little more awkward to finish like here. It's just the way I like to work. I'm left with 4 pieces ready to turn into the window surround. I use a tiny bit of PVA glue along the top of the main frame, and gently lay the first piece of the pediment into place. The glue doesn't grab immediately, so I have time to nudge the piece into the right place, and then ensure that it is all stuck down flat and close. Another bit of glue, and the next part goes on top in the same way. The tweezers are good to help squeeze it into place. I add glue again, and then with the triangle and the window lying on the surface, I gently slide them into contact. This avoids problem with my slightly shaky hands and keeps everything nice and flat and straight. I push it together with the base of the tweezers, and I smooth away the glue with the tweezer tips. Close up, I think this is looking enough like the Ilkley prototype to be passable, but it's those corbels which will make or break the appearance. So here is a line of those corbels stuck to 1mm thick grey card. I use tiny freehand jabbing cuts to follow the curve of the piece as closely as I can. The waste card falls away and I'm left with a curved edge which closely resembles my intentions. I use my ruler to help with the straight bit. I use the blade of the scalpel almost straight on and use incredibly gentle strokes. This makes the cut nice and clean and it avoids any tearing, fluffing or delaminating of the thick card. I'm left with a piece of card that is simply too small to hold by hand. I add a dab of glue on the window and I drop the tiny corbel into place. It slides around a bit and the natural moisture on my fingers causes the light piece of card to stick to my hands, but it gets there in the end. My 1mm thick card, once it's got the sticky label on top as well, works out at around about 1.2mm. So I use the tweezers to squeeze it and squash it into something closer to the 1mm of the card element underneath it. It's not perfect, but it can be corrected later once painted. It doesn't have the fancy elegance of the real thing in Ilkley, but it does have the overall shape and feel, and I am happy with my decisions. This one here has not been squashed properly. Let's squeeze it into shape. That's better. I use Weetabix packet for the upstairs windows and the string horses. It's super card, being really thin but really strong. I stick the label to the printed side as I find the unprinted side to work better with PVA glue. The same technique as before, long gentle strokes with the ruler over the bit I want to keep. I do the horizontal lines first but leave the string horse attached. This helps keep the card rigid while doing all the other cuts. I cut the vertical bars first. These pieces will be incredibly delicate once finished, so I try to cut out the elements in a way that should keep the component as supported as possible as I go. By getting the bars cut first whilst everything else is firmly attached, I can lower the risk of accidentally bending them. Once the bars on both sides are cut, I cut out the remainder of the interior rectangle. I now do the tops of the window and the string horse underneath. Finally, I freehand cut the remaining bits. Weetabix packet is very strong, which can sometimes make it a little bit tricky to cut. I didn't listen to my own advice that I gave just a minute ago, and I forced this bit away without having properly cut through it, so the end is delaminated a bit. Sometimes I throw the part away and start again, but on this occasion I just used a dab of glue and pushed it back together. So I'm left with 6 bits of Weetabix box, and these arrange onto the building along with the windows before, like this. Not bad. But before I can add them, they need to be painted. I have some Ammo acrylic paint in faded Sanai grey and light sand grey. These are a great match for the shades used on the scale scene stone texture. I drop the paint into 2 little puddles that naturally mix as I go. By dipping my paintbrush into one puddle or the other, the paint mixes in a natural way as I work, and it adds a subtle texture and weathering look without much effort. I simply paint each component on the front and sides. I use PVA glue to add the element to the building, and I take care to get it straight. With it in place and the glue wiped away, I paint the interior sides too. This removes the white edge of the card and it ties the whole thing nicely together. The result of all this is a vaguely Italianate looking frontage, which with the windows in place is starting to capture the elegance of the real thing in Ilkley. I've made many videos over the years about using the sticky label method to make window frames, but the original video is right here. Please go and take a look at it, I think you might like it. Also, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up as that really does help me. So until next time then, thank you for watching this video, take care, and I'll see you next time.